On the 14th of March, 1915, a coroner in the town of Ashworth, Lancashire, filed a supplementary report. It was appended to the autopsy of one Hector Lamont, private detective, aged 41. The report contained a single paragraph that the coroner later attempted to have stricken from the record. It read, in part, "The deceased, whose body has lain in refrigerated storage for 11 days, presented this morning with fresh ink stains on the index and middle fingers of the right hand." The ink is still wet. It matches the composition of the ink found in the deceased's personal journal, which was locked in an evidence cabinet in a separate building. The coroner's name was Dr. Edwin Hartgrove. He signed the report. Then he resigned his post. And he never practiced medicine again. To understand what happened in Ashworth, you must first understand the world that Ashworth existed in. 1915. The Great War was consuming Europe. Young men were vanishing into trenches by the hundreds of thousands. England smelled of coal smoke, carbolic acid, and grief. The spiritualist movement was surging. Families desperate for contact with dead sons flocked to mediums and seance parlors. But Ashworth was not a place of seances. It was a mill town. Practical. Suspicious of sentiment. The local constabulary still relied on phrenological assessments in criminal profiling, measuring the skulls of suspects with calipers. Photography was trusted as absolute evidence. If a camera captured it, it was real. Forensic science was crude, but earnest. Toxicology reports were handwritten. Fingerprint analysis was in its infancy, and the dead were expected to remain dead. That expectation, in Ashworth, would prove insufficient. Hector Lamont was not a remarkable man. He was thin, meticulous, fond of peppermint lozenges, which he kept in a small tin in his waistcoat pocket. He had served briefly as a constable in Burnley, before leaving the force under circumstances described only as a disagreement regarding method. By 1912, he had established himself as a private inquiry agent, operating from a rented room above a tobacconist on Gresham Lane. His case notes, which survive in partial form, reveal a man of obsessive precision. He cataloged everything: times, temperatures, the color of a suspect's cravat. He trusted only what he could document. In early February of 1915, Lamont accepted a case involving the suspected embezzlement of funds from the Ashworth Textile Workers Benevolent Society. The case led him to a man named Clement Poole, the society's treasurer. On the 28th of February, Hector Lamont was found dead in his office. His skull had been fractured by a single blow to the occipital bone. The weapon was never recovered. And there were no witnesses. The first anomaly was reported 3 days after Lamont's death. Father Thomas Brennick, the parish priest at St. Cuthbert's, came to the constabulary with a complaint that was meticulously documented in the station logbook. He stated that while locking the church at approximately 11 in the evening, he observed a figure seated in the 4th pew from the front. The figure was writing in a journal. Father Brennick recognized the figure as Hector Lamont. He had attended Lamont's funeral that same morning. When Brennick called out, the figure did not look up. But it spoke. It said a single word: Poole. Father Brennick described the voice as possessing what he called a wet quality, as though the throat were filled with something thicker than air. When he approached the pew, it was empty, but the wood was cold to the touch, unnaturally cold. And there was a smell. Peppermint. Over the following 8 days, the events in Ashworth escalated in ways that remain, to this day, unsettling and inexplicable. On the 4th of March, Constable James Whitlow reported that pages had appeared inside the evidence cabinet, where Lamont's personal effects were stored. The cabinet was locked. Only Whitlow and Inspector Reginald Marsh held keys. The pages were covered in handwriting that a graphologist from Manchester, a Mr. Arthur Fenimore, later confirmed under sworn testimony, was identical to Hector Lamont's. The content of those pages was devastating. They contained a detailed accounting of Clement Poole's embezzlement scheme, including dates, amounts, and the names of 2 accomplices, a solicitor named Garside and a bank clerk named Fenton. Information that had not appeared in any of Lamont's case notes recovered at the time of his death. On the 7th of March, Dr. Hartgrove conducted a secondary examination of Lamont's body at the request of Inspector Marsh. His clinical notes, preserved in the Ashworth Municipal Records, state the following: pulse and respiration absent, consistent with death. However, upon measuring the galvanic response of the fingertips using a Duchenne apparatus, I recorded intermittent electrical activity in the right hand at intervals of approximately 9 seconds. This is not possible in tissue deceased for 7 days. I repeated the measurement 4 times. The result was consistent. On the 9th of March, a night watchman at the Ashworth morgue named Peter Cavell signed an affidavit stating he had heard the sound of writing from inside the cold storage room, a rhythmic scratching, pen on paper. He did not open the door. He never returned to work. On the 12th of March, Inspector Marsh made a decision that would end his career. He arranged for a photographer, Mr. Leonard Crisp of Crisp and Daughters Photographic Studio, to set up a plate camera inside the cold storage room, aimed directly at the slab where Lamont's body lay. The room was sealed. The exposure was set for 40 minutes. When the plate was developed the following morning, it showed Lamont's body on the slab, exactly as expected. But his right arm, which had been placed at his side, now extended off the edge of the slab. The fingers were curled, as though they had just released something. On the floor beneath the hand, barely visible in the photograph's lower margin, was a folded piece of paper. That paper was recovered. It contained a single sentence in Lamont's handwriting. The weapon is beneath the 3rd flagstone in Poole's cellar. Leonard Crisp, upon seeing the developed image, suffered what was described as a cardiac episode. He survived, but he destroyed every plate in his studio that night. Every single one. Inspector Marsh ordered a search of Clement Poole's residence on the 13th of March. Beneath the 3rd flagstone in the cellar, officers recovered a lead pipe bearing traces of blood and hair consistent with Hector Lamont. Poole was arrested. He confessed within hours. He named Garside and Fenton exactly as the posthumous pages had indicated. All 3 men were convicted, but the case files were sealed by order of the Lancashire County Magistrate, who cited material of a nature likely to cause public disturbance. Dr. Hartgrove's supplementary report, the one describing the wet ink on a dead man's fingers, was ordered redacted. It survived only because a clerk made an unauthorized copy. The Ashworth morgue was demolished in 1923. No reason was recorded. The photographer's plate, the one showing Lamont's arm extended, has never been located. Hector Lamont was reinterred in an unmarked grave, as though someone wanted him forgotten. In 2017, Dr. Miriam Castellan of the Leiden Institute for Anomalous Biophysics published a paper titled Post-Mortem Bioelectric Persistence, a Quantum Coherence Model. In it, she proposed that under specific and poorly understood conditions, the quantum coherence of neural microtubules may persist after clinical death, potentially allowing residual intentionality to manifest as measurable physical phenomena. The paper was peer-reviewed. It was not retracted. It was simply never cited. Hector Lamont was a man who trusted only what he could document, and perhaps that obsession did not end when his heart stopped. Perhaps the need to finish the case was stronger than death itself. Or perhaps we are simply not equipped to understand what documentation means when the author is no longer alive. Consider this. If your final thought were strong enough, focused enough, desperate enough, could your hand still write? If this story unsettled you, subscribe to Forgotten Dread Tales and leave a comment telling us, what would you need to say badly enough to say it from the other side? We read every one.